And I was very satisfied with the briefing. It follows up on the original Gang of Eight briefing that we had more than a week ago, several days before the Operation Epic Fury began. I was satisfied at that time. I had, as I can speak for myself, as the leader of the legislative branch, the Speaker of the House, I had multiple follow-ups with the Secretary of State. I spoke with the President about it multiple times, and that was in advance of the operation, and we knew what was happening. I think there are two critical points that I just want to emphasize, the non-classified summary of what has happened here. First of all, to me, the most critical point is that this was a defensive measure, a defensive operation. And why is that? I took some notes, and this is not classified, so I'll tell you what I think is important. Israel was determined to act in their own defense here, with or without American support. Why? Because Israel faced what they deemed to be an existential threat. Iran was building missiles at a radical and a rapid clip to the point where our allies in the region could not keep up. As you know, Iran has long vowed to take out Israel, wipe it off the map, and they have long seen that as a critical threat to their very existence. Because Israel was determined to act, with or without the U.S., our Commander-in-Chief and the administration and the officials I just named had a very difficult decision to make. They had to evaluate the threats to the U.S., to our troops, to our installations, to our assets in the region and beyond, and they determined, because of the exquisite intelligence that we had, that if Israel fired upon Iran and took action against Iran to take out the missiles, then they would have immediately retaliated against U.S. personnel and assets. We have troops in harm's way, and we have many Americans in the region, and that was of great concern. If we had waited for all of those eventualities to take place, the consequences of inaction on our part could have been devastating. We don't know at what magnitude, but you can assume, because it is common sense, that if Iran had begun to fire all of their missile arsenal, short and mid-range missiles, at our personnel and our assets and our installations, we would have suffered staggering losses. And if we had waited to respond before acting first, then those losses would have been far greater than if we had done what we did. That was their decision. I can guarantee you this: if we had not acted, if the President, the Commander-in-Chief, had not acted as he did, those same officials would have been hauled in here by members of Congress and asked them why in the world they waited if they had exquisite intelligence, knowing that that would happen, that we would suffer such staggering losses. Why did they not act to prevent it? So I am convinced that they did the right thing. There's another critical point. What were the objectives? The objectives for our Operation Epic Fury, I am convinced, because I've now been to multiple briefings and I've understood the point of this, the objective was not regime change. The objective was to take out those missiles, the short and mid-range missiles, and their ability to produce them. We did that. That was objective number one. Objective number two was to eliminate their naval capabilities, destroy those and the missiles. And we are well on our way to accomplishing that mission. That is why I think the President has said, in his own words, the Commander-in-Chief has said this is going to be a operation that's short in duration. We certainly hope that's true. We pray for our troops and all those in harm's way, our allies as well. I am encouraged that our NATO allies are standing with us. The Arab states are largely standing with us, publicly, certainly privately. Iran was a great threat to everybody in the region and everybody in the world because it was an evil regime. The Ayatollah is no more. That was not the mission of the U.S. to go in and take out the regime, but that happened, and in my estimation, that is a great development for freedom-loving people around the world. Go ahead, Rahim.
Sorry, Speaker.
Yes.
Do you guys discuss the need for a supplemental to get some new munitions and other things that our military might need?
It was brought up in discussion. There are more details to be determined, of course. It depends upon how long the operation goes and what the need is. But our appropriators certainly asked that question, but I think there'll be some time before we can put a final number on it.
Speaker, is there at any point you think Congress will need to give congressional authorization?
So You know my background. I'm a constitutional law attorney. I'm a jealous guardian of Article 1 in the legislative branch. My understanding of the law, and has always been, and this is the tradition and the way the law has been used and observed over many decades, the President was acting well within his authority. What I just told you is the scope of what happened here and the situational awareness that they had at the time to make this decision. It's not a declaration of war. It's not something that the President was required, because it's defensive in nature and in design and in necessity, to come to Congress and get a vote first. And if they had briefed a larger group than the Gang of Eight, you know, there's a real threat that very sensitive intelligence that we had, you know, might have been leaked or something. So this is why the Commander-in-Chief of our armed forces has the latitude that any Commander-in-Chief, any President always has, because they have a set of information that is sensitive, timely, and urgent, and they have to be able to act upon it. They did that. Now, there are, as you know, under our system, there are timetables that are involved here, but I think the idea that we would move a War Powers Act vote right now, I mean, it will be forced to the floor, but the idea that we would take the ability of our Commander-in-Chief, the President, take his authority away right now to finish this job is a frightening prospect to me. It's dangerous. And I am certainly hopeful, and I believe we do have the votes to put it down. That's going to be a good thing for the country and our security and stability.
But just how can you call this a defensive operation if the U.S. struck first, Mr. Speaker?
The U.S. struck in a defensive posture if we knew for a fact. Wait a minute. Let me answer the question. I thought I just did answer that question. If we knew for a fact that Israel was going to move, Iran was going to respond, and Iran was going to strike not just Israel, but the U.S. Remember, we're the great Satan, as they always say. Israel's the little Satan, okay? That they would act. We knew that intelligence. There was a name for the plan. We had all the information, all the intelligence. I'm not going to tell you how we knew that, but we did. We have the greatest intelligence operation in the world and the greatest military. And we had an obligation and responsibility to use it to protect our interest, our people first, our troops, and our personnel and our assets. That is an America first objective. That is the objective of the country. The first responsibility of the federal government is to protect the country and its interests, and that's what we did here. I don't know how it's
right now. Congress has the authority to declare war. Shouldn't it have authorized this war?
In my view, right now, our military and the Commander-in-Chief, he is presiding over the completion of an operation that was limited in scope, limited in its objective, and absolutely necessary for our defense. I think that operation will be wound up quickly. By God's grace, it will. That is our prayer for everybody involved, our troops and everyone else. And, of course, for the people of Iran, who are now rising up euphorically to have a chance for freedom, to have an evil, murderous regime removed. It is a great thing and a great time in history, and we're proud to be a part of it. Thank you.
Boots on the ground. This vote may have been limited, but the retaliation is not. Are you saying that the United States of America couldn't have gotten Israel to hold back, that we had to react to them?
Obviously, I've got a slightly different take. Let me start with acknowledgement of the 4 American soldiers who've been lost. 6 now. 6 American soldiers who've been lost, and the expectation that more will be lost. Let me also indicate that the demise of the Iranian leadership I shed no tears for. Let's also be clear. I said before, I've said now, there was no imminent threat to the United States of America by the Iranians. There was a threat to Israel. But if we equate a threat to Israel as the equivalent of an imminent threat to the United States, then we are in uncharted territory. We have seen the goals for this operation change now, I believe, 4 or 5 times. A week ago, it was about the Iranian nuclear capacity. A few days later, it was about taking out the ballistic missiles. It was then, in the president's own words, about regime change. Excuse me. Because somebody claimed to have invented cell phones, I could turn them off. It was then about regime change, and now we hear it's about sinking the Iranian fleet. A question I asked is, when the President of the United States says to the Iranian people, rise up, this is your chance to take your country back. What happens if 100,000 Iranian citizens go onto the streets of Tehran and the IRGC forces, which are brutal, murder 5,000, murder 10,000, murder 20,000? Does the United States of America have an obligation there, since the President called them into the streets? This is still a war of choice that has been acknowledged by others, was dictated by Israel's goals and timelines. Israel is a great ally of America. I stand firmly with Israel. But I believe at the end of the day, when we are talking about putting American soldiers in harm's way, when we have American casualties and expectations of more, there needs to be the proof of an imminent threat to American interest. I still don't think that standard has been met. I think the President needs to come before the Congress, and for that matter, the American people, and decide amongst these 4 or 5 goals that have been laid out, what is the real goal? What is the objective? What is our exit plan? What obligation do we have now to the Iranian people if they do rise up based upon his call for them to go to the streets? And what is the imminent threat to the United States' interest that caused this conflict? So I will clearly be voting with, I think, the bipartisan efforts that will take place in the Senate, and I hope in the House, to bring forward the War Powers Act.
Senator, has the administration explained what the end game is here? How do they describe that to you? And what about the impact, the cost on Americans that it's had so far? American assets, how much damage has the U.S. sustained from this war?
Listen, I think it is, I'll grant the administration this, it is way too early, 48 hours in, for cost estimates. Clearly, when you combine the efforts of the amount of munitions that we have spent over the last year attacking the Houthis, the amount of munitions that's been spent on other ventures, I think the 7 different military conflicts the President has put America into, our munitions are low. That's public knowledge. It will require additional funding. Funding where we have other domestic needs as well. In terms of the end game, I've heard 5 different rationales for what our goal, like 5, nuclear, the missiles, regime change, sinking of the Iranian fleet, at least 4 different goals in the last 8 or 9 days. I'm not sure which of those goals, if met, means that we're at an end game.
Senator, can I ask you, looking back over the last year, all the times that Congress had a chance to weigh in, or the administration was acting, whether it was in Venezuela or other places, or even in Iran previously, looking back, do you feel like Congress has missed its moment here? Is it basically irrelevant when it comes to declaring war, or is there something that can be done?
So far, Congress has been totally irrelevant, because we've not used our power. And again, I go back to the irony of, if you look back in early January, when the Iranian people bravely, against this, again, awful regime, were in the streets on record numbers. You could have actually made a case then that taking a strike towards the IRGC might have pushed the people forward and the regime to crumble. We couldn't do that for two reasons. Because the military capability that we would normally have in the region, the aircraft carrier Ford, was off the coast of Venezuela on another one of the president's military follies, and the ability for us to bring our European allies to bear helping us, who have diplomatic presence still with Iran, they were appropriately distracted because of the president's folly about Greenland. So I might not have agreed with an action then, but at least there was a logic to that moment in time. Now it appears that the timeline is not being driven by American imminent security concerns, but by others.
Senator, a while ago, the State Department urged Americans living in 14 countries in the Middle East to leave as soon as possible.
Pardon me, say that again.
A little while ago, the State Department urged Americans living in 14 Middle Eastern countries to leave as soon as possible so whatever commercial transportation is still available. Obviously, thousands of flights have already been canceled, more than any time since the start of the pandemic. What does that say to you about the planning for this?
Well, it says that, if this was being driven by imminent security threats from Iran against America, we would have, I think, had better planning. And the irony of this, as well, many times, as we know, when an American president takes an action, it's often in reaction to, and then he or she has to act because of the moment in time. This has been something that has been building up for months on end as this armada has come together. And the idea that there is then not a constitutional responsibility for the president to come to Congress after he's built up this fleet, and now, not my words, his words, launched a war against Iran. Anyone who argues otherwise hasn't read the Constitution.
Senator,